was the whole, the kind of the frenzy at the gate. You know, we got airplanes. This is I flew on both ways on an A320 Neo, it's called, and a next generation. Eric, we talked about that. What's a Neo mean?
That's upgraded version of the Airbus 321, and it has some system improvements that I couldn't speak to, but good set of long range gas tanks and very high power engines. So
basically, it carries. Can it carry any more people than the 321s?
I think physically it's almost the same physical size.
Yeah.
Just the power and the range is so much greater.
So yeah, so the modification is bigger engines get a bigger, so they can essentially carry more fuel and go further. And, sure. and you need that in the Hawaii market, right? Because you got to go across the Pacific there. So yeah. Anyway, and Eric, we were joking. I was texting as I was sitting in the airplane. First of all, I got tagged. I've been carrying a bag for 30 years as a crew member, and they wouldn't let me carry it on and put it in the overhead bin. I couldn't believe it. It's part of the reasons why I bought a ticket. Anyway, so I got through that. Eric coached me through that and calmed me down. And I get on the airplane and I'm talking to Eric about this, and he highlighted me to the power of those engines. And I want to tell you, I was impressed. Holy cow! You know, I've said here from time to time that the average time for takeoff is between 30 and 50 seconds. This sucker was off the ground in 24 seconds, and we were full of people, full of fuel, going to Hawaii, and I was really impressed because
wow.
There's some other airplanes that the other 321. Sometimes you can't get to cruise altitude for a while because it's too heavy. And but anyways, it was
quiet.
What's that?
I've heard that the engines are really quiet too.
And that was definitely noticeable as well. The engines were much quieter. So, and the 320s, the A320, 321 series, they were noted for that howl when you're at takeoff power there, and that alarmed a lot of people. But it didn't have that reverse whistling sound at all. It was a really good experience, and the bins are big and really pretty, all in all pretty nice. The seats, I can't say much for the seats. So they're skinnier, and in order to do that, they had to beef them up a little bit. So they're nice form fitting, but they get hard after a while. So take something to sit on would be my recommendation. Anyway, so coming back, it's an 11 o'clock departure out of there late at night. And for those of you who are, wonder why would they depart so late out of there, I think Eric touched on it last week. They do that because coming out of Hawaii, it's 6 hours back here to Phoenix. If they did it because the airplane that you arrive in Kona, it's one flight a day. It gets there at 2:30, so they could turn the airplane and leave about 3:30, 4 o'clock, something like that. But if they did that, you get here late at night, and now there's nothing to connect to. And in fact, this morning when we came in, we were a few minutes late, obviously, because of the delay getting airborne last night. And we had a majority of connections on the airplane. And so they made a little PA when we got to the gate. If you're not connecting, let the other people off. The whole damn airplane was connecting, other than me and a few other people. So the reason that they do operate late at night and make it an all-nighter is so that when we come in here in the morning, they got places to send people and flights to connect with. So that was that. So anyway, so we get all buttoned up and close up the airplane, and he shut the door. And like I said, they pushed back, and we went to the runway. And ultimately turned around. And I thought it was weird because I can kind of tell when they do a 180 there, and sure enough, we pulled back into the gate and then shut down the engines. The captain came on the PA at that point in time, and you know how important it is for me if the crew would keep everybody informed. And if I was the captain, I would have made the announcement a little bit earlier. And what he did was he just said that dispatch when they got their final paperwork, and I'm gonna have Eric talk about this a little bit more in detail, give you the really current information. But anyway, they had a discrepancy that they needed to resolve before they took off. And I'm thinking, if I'm a fearful flyer on board that airplane and I don't know what the heck's going on, and we take the runway and then we turn around and come back, I'm thinking, who are these guys and what are they doing? And so I think there was probably some concern on there. And then the captain, in his explanation, I'm sure he thought he did pretty good job just telling people that the dispatch had given them some new information. They need to come back and actually switch some bags around is what it amounted to. So what's that all about, Eric? Because you've flown the Kona flight on a 757 quite a bit.
Pretty regularly. So what happened there is each time our airplane takes off, any airplane takes off, airliner, we determine the center of gravity, what we call a weight and balance calculation. And it matters where we put people, where we put gas, where we put bags, cargo, that kind of thing. The aircraft is approved to operate in a wide center of gravity envelope, but we don't want to exceed any maximum performance weights, and we don't want to be outside of that envelope. So before we go, the company will transmit to us what we call a load closeout, and then the other companies may call it something different. But we taxi out, and when we get the load closeout, we can enter our what we call our zero fuel weight, our weight of everything but the gas, and the airplane knows the gas, and center of gravity calculations. And once that's done, the airplane knows how it's loaded. And we can make airspeed calculations that we've talked about before in other shows, our V1 and our climb speeds and that sort of thing. We make that from those numbers. And if we don't have those numbers, we cannot accurately predict or enter that information. So, and we've always talked about checks and balances with you guys. We'll talk about that a little bit. If we did not take off, we talked about each pilot having a flow, things they do mentally, and then we have a checklist to back it up. Both pilots are looking for that piece of paper. And you say, well, what if they forget? It's possible, but that will be tantamount to both pilots in advance deciding they're taking off from Phoenix when it's 110 degrees. It's a little warm, so they're not going to wear any pants. And they're going to my favorite imaginary airport, East Overshoe, Wisconsin, where it's never above 20 Fahrenheit. Well, that would be smart until they got about an hour into cruise, and especially before they got to East Overshoe. And especially before somebody filmed them on cell phone video. You're looking for that thing, and it's a habit. But ultimately, if for some reason it didn't occur to either pilot to look for this piece of paper, we have the checklist to back ourselves up with before we take off. And one of the call outs on that is our takeoff data and what we call our airspeed bugs, where we planned on our airspeed indicator to do certain things. And we cannot program that without having made those entries. So if we got all the way to there with no load closeout or weight and balance, we'd be going, well, where is it? Where is it? It's highly unlikely that we'd leave without it. Ultimately, though, these airplanes have been flown far outside of the center of gravity envelope, forward and aft and overweight by test pilots, and would highly likely fly just fine. But for regulations, for safety, certification, everything else, we just don't do it. If that makes sense.
So let's just real quick about center of gravity. What does that all mean? Okay, so here's an airplane, all right, and just talk about the people first. So you can imagine that. Let's just say the center of gravity for a given, well, two things. Eric said we never take off over the maximum allowable weight. So that's one category, and then center of gravity means that we have to have the weight distributed accordingly to always make sure that it's not tail heavy or nose heavy, like a teeter-totter, okay? And why is that? Because if we have too much weight, like let's just imagine we had everybody scrunched into the back of the airplane, so we leave the front half empty. Now it's gonna be much heavier in the tail. And now in order to keep the nose from settling, always climbing up like that and then running out of energy and all that, we use the elevator back here that controls, with the airflow, it controls our ability to control the pitch. So if we have too much weight in the back, it'll wanna nose up. If we have too much weight in the front, it'll want to nose down. And so that's what Eric is talking about when he talks about keeping the center of gravity appropriate. Now, this is advanced center of gravity. So now you're going to look at the top view and whoops, and lose one of the wings. All right. And I hate that when it happens. So we have fuel in the fuselage, okay, and in the wings. So as you might imagine, as we burn fuel in flight, the center of gravity shifts a little bit because of the fuel burn. So we know from the time that we leave the gate there and get our final closeout, like Eric talked about, we know how much the airplane or where the center of gravity needs to be. And he said an envelope, Okay, we know where it is when we start, and it needs to be in an appropriate place. We know where it's going to change, how it's going to transition in flight, and then we know where it's going to be on landing. And I mean, this is just another one of the very, very complicated things that you don't have to worry about as a passenger. Okay, and I don't know if you got anything else, Eric, you want to add to that? Or
No, that was very good. I'm glad you talked about the fuel, and so obviously, as Ron said, as we burn gas en route, we still have all the bags, we still have all the passengers, but as we burn thousands of pounds of fuel en route, and the positioning of the remaining fuel in the tanks does change the center of gravity in that envelope, and that's one of the things the company looks at before takeoff, that our takeoff center of gravity is okay, and then our landing center of gravity is okay, that it won't move outside of that certified envelope as we lighten our load of fuel. I'm really glad you brought that up.
And how much fuel would you have just to burn? What's the burn from Hawaii either way? It's a little bit more going out than it's coming back.
Coming back, I probably burn in the high 40s, 40 something thousand pounds, 45,000 pounds.
Okay.
And going out could burn 50, 55 easily.
Yeah.
Going the other way.
So that's a big chunk of weight there. So anyway, okay. So anyway, so that's what happened, and what it ended up doing is we literally pulled in the gate there. I saw them pull up a bag loader, and a couple of guys got up there, and they unloaded a bunch of bags from the aft cargo bin and put them in the front cargo bin right below where I was sitting, and we were on our way. And it was a good flight. I don't know if we got any questions or anybody popped in there with, hopefully that stimulated.
Yeah, we do have a couple of comments to our poll question. I just put it up on the screen again. Elaine, do you want to jump in with some of the questions or comments, please?
Yeah, we got a couple comments. First of all, Michelle, hi Michelle. She said, poll question. My thought would be people need to pack lighter. I agree. Jim Duke, yeah. Jim Duke responded. He said, the fact that dispatch made that call confirms that there is a team of people constantly monitoring the plane to make sure it operates safely. And
yeah. Absolutely, and that's a good point, and Eric touched on that. It's you know, it doesn't mean that number one, if we had taken off, you know, one of the things that has changed dramatically in the airline industry as a result of 9/11 beyond the security part is a subset of that is we now know your bag, we know how much your bag weighs because we put it on a scale up there. So we have a better and more accurate count of bags. One of the positive sub benefits of that to you is we lose fewer bags in the airline industry than we ever did because we got to keep tabs on them. So that's one of the biggest benefits to this is we do know much more accurately now the weight. We used to do a lot of rounding and we were conservative about that. But the biggest cost to the airlines was that we went off and left cargo and stuff on the ground sometimes because we always rounded up. And now we don't have to do that. But that's why we do have a team, as Jim correctly pointed out, and dispatch is in charge of that team. And they're the ones, when we do the final closeout, they're the ones that make sure and look at the numbers and make sure if there is a call like that. So anyway, okay, go ahead, Elaine.
And then Lily Lorraine Adams. And Lily, I don't want to try and pronounce the rest of your last name because I'm pretty positive I'll butcher it. So my apologies. Poll question, my thoughts, why was this not dispatched sooner? What would have happened if the airplane was not dispatched sooner and the airplane took off? I would have felt less safe knowing that it was caught close to takeoff.
Yeah, and I think Eric addressed that. And if you do still have questions on that, and we don't get to them here, please put them in the post there, and we'll be happy to answer that. But that is why I responded the way I did, and why Eric commented earlier is that's the checks and balances that we have going for us, so that we don't miss something like that.
And throw in real quick for 10 seconds. It's always, if it's caught close to takeoff, because the load people on the ground to put the stuff in, added it up, everything else, fuel, cargo, bags, they know what they actually put on the airplane when it's closed up and gone. there's a plan, and then what actually happened. And what actually happened is always minutes before takeoff. So the catch will always come like that, minutes before takeoff.
If you all knew what goes on in the operation, you'd be amazed that we ever leave on time. Because think about it, we can have a late arrival connecting flight. For example, let's just say that you were coming in on that same flight that I came in on this morning from Kona, and you were continuing on to Dallas Fort Worth, okay? And we were late. The people have to run literally to get to their gate and get on the airplane in time. What do you think about the bags? I can tell you what they do with the bags because I sat at baggage claim waiting for about 40 minutes waiting for my bag. Why? Because they're going to do all the connecting bags first to get your bag to meet you on the flight. And so that's why the last minute, and we can taxi out because we know we're going to be on the ground anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes under normal circumstances. And during that time, they're updating the forms, and that's why we have a final closeout. So the fact that they didn't learn this until late, one of the problems is it's not a busy airport. We were the only airplane operating at 11 o'clock last night at the Kona airport. So there were no delays. We were close. I think we were close to the departure, and we took off to the north, I believe.
North.
So yeah. Yeah, so we basically taxied out and we were at the end of the runway. So that's why it happened fast. And you know, I may have presented this as if the crew was like, you know, like it was a faux pas. But I think more it would be fair to say that when they planned on getting their closeout before they got to the runway, they just didn't know that that was going to be the conclusion and they would have to go back. So rather than focus on oh my God, what would have happened if they hadn't caught it, focus on the fact that that's the system and the way it operates. And the only thing that happened is they had an unexpected outcome to that. Either they added more bags later and somebody didn't get the word and put them in the wrong bin, so that when they got the final numbers, it affected the center of gravity, but did not affect the weight of the airplane because we had plenty of weight room to go. They just had to move some bags from the back to the front. And again, prior to 9/11, we didn't know a lot about this. We just flew because when they test the airplane and certify it, they fly it, you know, and they evaluate where can the center of gravity be, and when it's at the extremes, how does it operate and all that. Okay, so
there's also a good point that our resident flight attendant Diane brought up, and she said that's also the reason why they not always can accommodate passengers wanting to switch seats as well. So the center of gravity issue is, I guess, really down to a science and having an understanding if everybody sat on the left side of the plane, or, you know.
Yeah,
so,
left and right, not so much, but fore and aft. And we've had people over the years that will say, hey, I was on this flight and they ask us to move, where is it usually? From the back to the front, right here? It's usually.
Generally, that's how it works out, yeah.
Yeah. And so when they do that, you'll notice that it was an empty airplane, basically. So they had a lot of seats, and by virtue of people sitting more people sitting in the tail. So that's when you have to move people. And again, I've had people say, are you kidding me? They had 3 of us and they asked us to move, you know, like 6 rows up like that. Oh my God. And then now you're thinking, if it's that critical, I'm not going to fly. No, it's because that's the way it is. And when we have the numbers, you can't ignore it because that's the way the system's designed.
Well, so, and as Diane brought up on the smaller planes, on the regional jets and turboprops and that kind of thing that you'll fly, for Caribbean, an example, smaller airplanes, and that envelope just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So the positioning of people bags is more and more critical. So they'll typically move people for seats like that. And as you said, one of my favorite quotes from the movie Animal House, is, knowledge is good. It's good to know that.
Yes. Yeah.